Right, let's pick up on a story we focused on earlier in the program. Takatso's deal to buy a 51% stake in SAA almost 2 years down the line is not yet finalised. In the meantime, SAA since September last year has been back up in the air. So, could we see SAA grounded if the Takatso deal doesn't come through in time, or is SAA already a going concern once more? I'm joined now by Guy Leitch, and he, of course, is publisher and editor of SA Flyer magazine. Guy, thank you so much for joining us. So, in terms of the Takatso deal, Takatso says they're still fully committed, but the deal at the moment is still stuck at the Competition Commission. Do you think that the involvement of Gideon Novick and Lift is the real sticking point here?
It's a good question, because there is a real problem with monopoly practices looming, and the side effect of that has been the complete reluctance or inability of the Department of Public Enterprises, or for that matter SAA, to rescue Mango, which is very rescuable, in favour of, we believe, in favour of Lift. In other words, that might be one of the preconditions of the deal from Takatso. But I think that last year we were seeing claims that unless the Takatso deal was finalised, the airline would be just left to die. That fear may be receding, because the airline has traded very profitably over the past 3 or 4 months. It's true to say that almost every airline should have been making good money over this period, because there has, as we've known across the industry, been a massive oversupply with a shortage of demand. So the airlines have been basically price makers rather than price takers, which is a pleasant change. SAA has told me has managed to repay 2 tranches of its pre-commencement funding. So that has reduced its debt burden significantly. And hopefully with these positive cash flows will continue for the foreseeable future. You know, we are seeing a much streamlined, shrunk airline. Professor Lamola has been very slow in getting back into long-haul routes, and correctly so in my opinion, because they've been largely loss-making, and I can't see that they're going to be able to make money on long-haul routes, especially since the other airlines have got in and eaten SAA's lunch. But for now, for the foreseeable future, for let's say a year, I believe SAA can continue on its by itself without Takatso, while it waits for not just Competition Commission approval, but also, most importantly, SAA approval and Air Services license. Sorry, not SAA approval, CAA approval, and also the Air Services Licensing Council approvals. All of those which should take another 6 months to a year, quite reasonably.
Why is it all taking so long?
Yeah, you know, you'd think that SAA, as the state-owned airline, would have enough clout to try and facilitate these processes. But I've seen very promising signs from the Air Services Licensing Council that they are not to be swayed, they are not to be pushed about. And they've been giving up or handing over routes from SAA, from Mango, from SA Express to the other airlines, notably Airlink and Semair. So it's nice to see that these organizations are being properly independent. I think the CAA could get on with it a little bit quicker, because it'll eventually have to issue a new AOC, that's an aircraft operator certificate. That normally takes up to 18 months, so I could see that happening a little quicker than that. But yeah, the process has always been understated by the Department of Public Enterprises. My view was that it was always going to take much longer than the end of March, which is what Minister Pravin Gordhan had promised.
Yeah, so as you say, it's likely to extend past that hoped-for deadline. But bearing in mind that SAA is back in the sky and operating at a profit at the moment, does SAA still need the Takatso deal?
That is the $1 million, or at least the 3 billion rand question, I suppose. And my suspicion is perhaps not. I think that there are key elements within government, including that from Pravin Gordhan, that are quite opposed or reluctant to privatise SAA. There's been resistance to it back since 2000, when it was supposed to have been privatised with Coleman Andrews. And I don't see any reason why that has changed right now. If they think that the airline will run profitably, I think that they may well decide not to go ahead with the privatisation and find other reasons to perhaps close down or exclude the Takatso consortium deal.
Look, of course, there is all this issue of the two. I think it's now what Takatso told me, and you've also heard this from SAA. The debt of SAA is now sitting at around 2.5 billion. That's not insignificant. Could that alone be the reason why SAA might have to rely on Takatso?
No. The DPE, the Department of Public Enterprises, had promised Takatso that the airline would be sold to them free of debt. So in other words, we, the taxpayers, were being burdened with the number is 16 billion rands worth of debt ultimately. Look, a lot of that was dealt with during the near liquidation process, the Mango closure, the business rescue process, and so on. So and creditors were seriously compromised. But the clear undertaking to Takatso is that it gets the airline free of debt.
Okay, so that debt, and we do still seek clarity on how it's going to be sorted out, but it's probably going to come out of taxpayer money. Takatso hasn't actually paid for SAA. All the deal says that they don't need to pay in the sense that they are just putting up that 3 billion rand for operating costs. Takatso says that's actually a fair deal because SAA was basically collapsing, and they've cited other examples of other businesses where the same sort of thing happens. Do you think that this is a fair deal for SAA, bearing in mind that it seems to be showing that it's able to survive for now?
Well, there has been a lot of questions, serious questions asked as to whether the 3 billion supposed operating capital injection is a fair price to pay for Takatso. There was a very strong legal challenge mounted just a few months ago to contest that particular point. SAA is undoubtedly worth a lot. It's still got a great brand. It's still got a lot of important infrastructure, even the Fly SAA website and booking systems, the existing routes that it's got. It's still got 1 or 2 aircraft left that it doesn't actually lease. So there is real substantial value in there. And in particular, there's huge value in the SAA technical component, which with its massive hangars and inventory of spares and land that the hangars are on and so on. So in my opinion, 3 billion for just ongoing money to be injected into the business is probably quite light. And a big question remains as to where this 3 billion is going to come from. There is fear that Takatso will look to its parent, the Harith Consortium, which has access to PIC, Public Investment Corporation funds.
All right, thank you very much. So your guess, if that deal goes ahead, it could be by mid-year, is that right?
I think mid-year is still too early. I would think the soonest we'd likely to see it is towards the end of the year, and even that's optimistic.
All right, we'll have to just keep an eye on this one. Thank you so much for chatting to us. Guy Leitch, publisher and editor of SA Flyer magazine.